The great halls of the council shimmered with uneasy silence. For once, the crystal walls normally radiant with shifting auroras felt heavy, almost somber. 12 of the galaxy's most powerful minds sat in rigid attention, their eyes fixed on one figure at the chamber's center. I stood before them, Ambassador Dell of the Aerith Syndicate, a diplomat by training, empath by design. I had negotiated truces between star-warring clans, soothed the wrath of solar empires, and unraveled misunderstandings that could have ignited planetary holocausts. Yet something about the way the council looked at me now was different. You are to make contact. The prime voice finally spoke, with a species called humans. The name echoed oddly. Not aggressive, not noble, just human. They've reached space travel, added another. They call their planet Earth. My mind immediately cataloged the mission as routine contact, observation, report. I'd done this before, but their faces said otherwise. There was a hesitation behind their eyes, a disquiet they hadn't voiced. What troubles you? I asked. The answer came not in words, but in the reports placed before me. I read in silence, creatures who thrived in climates with 50-degree swings in a single day, who consumed substances that would be classified as biotoxins on civilized worlds, who played with danger as if it were a toy. They built games that simulated death. They challenged one another by leaping from cliffs. They called it recreation. This cannot be accurate, I muttered, scanning again. We checked 3 times. The prime voice confirmed. Something clenched within me. They have a thing they call extreme sports, another murmured. My grip tightened. My people view safety not just as wisdom but as moral duty. Risk is a failure. Pain is regression. What sort of species entertains itself by tempting death? Still, I nodded. I accept the mission. My kind can feel the emotional pulses of others. It makes us suited to diplomacy. And in that moment, the wave of relief from the council was tangible. 3 days later, I stood aboard the vessel prepared for my journey. My fingers drifted across the controls as I stared out toward the stars toward Earth. I had been to 100 worlds, but none with the reputation this one carried. I would be their first official contact with our civilization, and as the stars bent around my vessel in transit, I realized that nothing I had studied, nothing I had witnessed, could prepare me for what awaited below. Not even close. The moment Earth rose into view, it shimmered like a promise blue, cloud-wreathed, alive with contrast. But as my ship broke through the upper atmosphere, that promise gave way to awestruck disorientation. New York City, I had studied the term, but I hadn't truly imagined it. Towers jagged, gleaming, impossibly tall pierced the sky like artificial mountains. They defied nature, safety, and even logic. No species I knew would build homes hundreds of levels into the air. No structure on Aerith exceeds to stories, not for aesthetic reasons, for survival. But here, humans stacked metal and glass into the heavens, then lived inside them. Willingly. As my vessel approached the designated landing site on the roof of one such tower, I fought the tremble in my hands. Wind howled at that height, pressure shifted, turbulence grew violent. It was unnatural, and yet they stood there waiting, calm, smiling, wearing tight body coverings they called suits, shaking my hand as though standing above the clouds was a casual affair. Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Dell, one of them said. I muttered my thanks, forcing my fingers to steady. They ushered me inside. I hoped for relief instead. I found an elevator, a vertical box designed to launch its occupants up or down at reckless speeds. I asked no questions. I simply gripped the railing and prayed to every neural god that the floor would remain beneath me. But that was only the beginning. From atop the observation deck, they encouraged me to look out. It's a clear day, one said. You can see for miles. I did, and I saw chaos, beautiful, terrifying chaos. Rivers of moving machines they called cars, flying blades they called helicopters weaving between buildings. Millions of humans flowed like water through concrete veins. So much noise, so much motion. How do you live like this? I whispered, forgetting all decorum. Like what? They asked, genuinely confused. I gestured helplessly. So high, so crowded, so loud. They laughed, not cruelly, but like I had asked whether stars were bright. You should see Tokyo, another said. Or Shanghai. The words dropped like stones into my stomach. There were bigger cities? As the day wore on, the pattern deepened. They didn't just climb the sky, they tunneled beneath the earth. A subway system. Vast metallic serpents carrying thousands beneath the surface. Their restaurants had windows showcasing dizzying heights as they ate. Their children played beside precipices like they were playgrounds, utterly unafraid. By nightfall, I had filled an entire datapad. Every note led to the same conclusion. Humans were not merely unbothered by danger. They had learned to love it, and I, once the most composed diplomat of my kind, stood in a hotel room on the 47th floor, staring out over a city of madness, wondering if I had stepped into a hallucination shared by an entire species. But this was no hallucination, this was Earth, and it was just beginning to reveal itself. On my second day among humans, my guides informed me that I would be learning about their entertainment. That word had always meant serenity to me. Shared stories, soft lights, reflective dialogue, cultural rituals that celebrated harmony and understanding. So when they said we were going to a theater, I relaxed. A mistake. The room darkened. A massive screen glowed before us. I felt a flicker of comfort until the first explosion. Humans, running, screaming, leaping from buildings. Vehicles spun, shattered, crashed through crowds. Fire, collapse, combat, violence so unrelenting, it didn't feel like fiction. I reached for the seat's armrest and gripped it until my knuckles dulled to white. This is one of our top action movies, my guide whispered, beaming. Action? I could hardly breathe. A character fell from a building and caught a rope. The crowd erupted in cheers. Cheers. Is this real? I asked. Oh no, he replied. Just stunts, special effects. Even so, I trembled. Not from the images alone, but from the audience. They weren't distressed. They were joyful, smiling, children included. The movie ended. I exhaled in hope. It was a false hope. Now, said another guide, we'll show you some real fun. They called it a sports arena. Humans rode machines onto wheels, motorcycles, and launched themselves into the air. Flips, spins, death spirals. The crowd roared. One fell. A gasp escaped me. He stood up, waved, and kept going. This is called motocross, said the guide. You should see skydiving. They showed me footage. Humans jumping from aircraft, free falling, sometimes without parachutes, on purpose delaying their only hope of survival to maximize excitement. I sat down. Hard. Why? I asked again and again. Why do you risk yourselves? Their answers came in foreign concepts. Adrenaline, thrill, pushing the limit. None of it translated. Then came Rocky, a film about two humans who struck each other repeatedly in pursuit of honor. Boxing, they called it. And apparently, it was only one of many such activities. Wrestling, mixed martial arts, UFC. They weren't trying to destroy each other, my guides insisted. It was about technique, discipline, willpower. I wrote notes with shaking hands. They simulate danger in stories. They build sports from it. They cheer when someone falls, not out of cruelty, but out of shared awe. They measure greatness by who dares more, and they teach their children to do the same. That night, in the alien glow of my 47th floor hotel room, I explored something they called YouTube. Surfing waves the size of buildings, climbing frozen waterfalls, racing machines, on narrow cliffs, walking on ropes stretched between mountains. Each act had millions of views. Each performer a celebrated hero. I had come to understand diplomacy as navigating logic, but Earth didn't run on logic. Earth ran on the love of the edge. And I wasn't sure I had ever truly understood what courage meant until I met the species that treated it like oxygen. I had thought I'd seen the worst. I had thought that watching humans leap from the sky for pleasure would be the apex of my discomfort. I was wrong. The third day began in what they called a hospital. A sanctuary of healing, I assumed. Sterile, quiet, safe. And at first, it was. White halls, organized systems, medical staff in crisp uniforms, machines humming softly. Then I saw the operating room. Behind a glass window, a human lay still upon a table. Surrounding them stood others in masks, preparing tools that gleamed under surgical light. What are they doing? I asked. A routine appendectomy, the guide replied, cheerful. My translation module flickered. I had surely misheard. You cut into them? I said. Of course, the doctor answered. We remove an infected organ before it ruptures. He said it with pride. I could barely stand. On my world, we use molecular harmonics to restore damaged tissue. Incisions are barbarism. Blades are relics. The idea of physically opening the body. It was unthinkable. Would you like to observe? The doctor asked, holding up a scalpel. I almost fainted, but it didn't stop there. On another floor, I was shown a dental wing. I watched as a patient conscious, awake allowed another human to insert metal instruments into their mouth. They're not even asleep. I whispered, not necessary, said the guide. Just a numbing agent. My body nearly collapsed. They remained awake while metal scraped bone from within. Then came the revelation about internal repair. Metal rods, screws, plates, inserted into limbs to mend breaks, devices stitched into hearts, synthetic hips and knees, implants and transplants. All done with a surgical calm that defied every instinct of civilized life. They rebuild themselves, I murmured, and still, the revelation spiraled deeper. Some humans perfectly healthy chose to undergo these procedures voluntarily. Not for illness, not for injury, but for aesthetics. To change their faces, their bodies, their identities. They cut themselves. By choice. My datapad slipped from my hands. In my culture, the body is a sacred geometry, not to be altered. But here, humans reshape themselves like artists working clay. By the end of the tour, I was silent, hollow, staring into the abyss of their resilience, because it wasn't just their willingness to cut, mend, and modify. It was how casually they spoke of it, as if the act of opening the body were no more alarming than brushing one's hair, and perhaps most terrifying of all. They survived it, they healed, and they did it again. That night, sleep eluded me. The visions of scalpels and steel haunted my mind, but buried in the horror was the first flicker of something else, a question I wasn't ready to face. What if they weren't broken? What if this was a strength? On the fourth day, I sat alone, high above the city, trying to steady my hand as I began to draft the first official transmission to the Galactic Council. My mission was simple: observe, evaluate, report. But nothing about humans was simple. I stared at the blank screen, then began to type. To the Honorable Galactic Council. My fingers hesitated. How do you explain a species that violates every known principle of intelligent life, yet thrives? I wrote carefully. All prior assumptions must be re-examined. Humans break every rule of survival instinct that we once held as universal truth. I described their vertical cities, their comfort with heights, their strange affection for confinement inside vertical transport boxes. I explained how they allowed their children to walk beneath skyscrapers as if they were trees, but that wasn't the heart of it. I continued. They subject themselves to sound waves at volumes we classify as weaponized. They call it music. They gather in masses to experience this physical assault together and call it joy. I wrote of their dietary practices, consuming plants laced with chemical irritants, celebrating food not for its taste but for its pain. Spicy, they called it, a badge of honor. I reported on saunas, boiling rooms, followed by icy plunges into freezing water, and they relished the jolt. They laughed while their bodies screamed, and then I came to entertainment, the most baffling trait of all. Council members, I warned, some sections may disturb those with gentle constitutions. I wrote of thrill rides that mimicked fatal plunges, roller coasters, designed to terrify, constructed to simulate disaster. And yet humans waited in long lines, eager for the rush. They built entire industries around horror, crafting simulations of fear, of pain, of death, and consumed them with glee. I described sports, not games of intellect, but trials of exhaustion, endurance, collision. The strongest didn't rest. They ran farther, lifted heavier, endured more, and I reached the most unsettling part: medicine. They cut into their own bodies, sometimes while awake, in order to repair themselves. They install metals, artificial organs, replacements. Some do it for utility, some for appearance. But it wasn't just behavior. It was attitude, calm, confident, proud. Most alarming, I wrote, is their detachment. They treat invasive procedures with the same tone one might use to describe lunch. I paused, my thoughts spiraling. If survival was the great cosmic test, then humans had rewritten the syllabus. They did not evade fear. They embraced it. They did not hide from pain. They measured themselves against it. And so I concluded with a series of recommendations. Do not attempt intimidation. It will fail. Do not mistake fearlessness for ignorance. Do not approach with condescension. Humans are not less evolved. They are differently evolved. Finally, I requested something no Aerith ambassador had ever requested in an official missive. Upon return, I request access to psychological restoration services. The exposure to human medical practice has produced persistent, invasive imagery and emotional instability. And just before I sent the message, I heard a new sound. I turned to the window. Humans leapt from a neighboring tower, descending with fabric wings they called parachutes. Laughing as they plummeted, I returned to my console. Addendum. The most terrifying truth about humans is not their behavior but how quickly that behavior starts to feel normal. I pressed send, then closed my eyes, because I knew this planet was changing me. On the 5th day, something shifted, not in them, in me. Until now, I had observed humans with disbelief. Every ritual, every instinct seemed inverted. What others avoided, they embraced. What others feared, they studied. What others resisted, they celebrated. But something began to stir beneath my revulsion. Curiosity. My epiphany began in an unlikely place. A gym. It was a building where humans gathered to strain themselves, voluntarily. They lifted weights that threatened to crush them, ran on machines that never led anywhere, grunted, sweat, collapsed, then smiled. I asked a man, breathless and glowing with exertion, "Why do you do this?" "Because it makes us stronger," he said, as if it were obvious. The simplicity of it pierced me. Strain begets strength. That's when I began to see the pattern. The skyscrapers weren't just engineering marvels, they were declarations. Testaments to human refusal. Refusal to be bound by gravity, by fear, by nature. Their sports were not acts of recklessness but trials, rites, opportunities to confront failure and emerge renewed. Their surgeries were not mutilations but repairs, reconfigurations, triumphs over entropy. It was not madness. It was metamorphosis. Everything they did, from the meals that burned their tongues, to the stories that shattered their calm, to the competitions that punished the body, it all pointed to the same truth. Humans do not merely endure challenge, they are sculpted by it. That evening, I watched a child fall in a park. She scraped her knee, cried. Her parent comforted her but did not remove her from play. She wiped her tears, stood again, and continued. That child had learned something. Fall, feel, rise. A human school. I watched students fumble through complex problems, fail tests, try again. In my society, mistakes are shame. Here they were, tools, not blemishes, building blocks. I wandered through their libraries. Page after page of their history screamed the same refrain, catastrophe followed by adaptation. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars. Each trial sharpened them, each failure taught them to reach higher, and higher still. I visited their space center. Humans stood before a colossal machine designed to leave the planet. Risk hung in the air, but so did I. They weren't afraid of the danger, they welcomed it. "We're going to Mars," one of them said to me. "It's dangerous, but that's why it matters." In that moment, everything I had seen, every contradiction, every terror clicked into place. It wasn't that humans defied logic. It was that they had redefined it. In their world, discomfort was not something to be avoided, it was fuel. Their pain, a path. Their fear, a forge. Their chaos, a crucible. And suddenly I realized, the very things that made them incomprehensible were the very things that made them powerful. In the days that followed, I saw Earth differently. Not calmer but clearer. The towering buildings no longer loomed as threats. They rose now as symbols, each one a monument to the refusal to yield, to surrender, to submit. The sirens, the chaos, the friction of millions colliding in cramped space. It wasn't dysfunction. It was motion, momentum, life. I watched a man with artificial legs sprint across a stadium. I watched an elderly woman climb mountains with a machine in her chest that pulsed in place of a heart valve. They weren't surviving despite adversity, they were transcending because of it. In my final reports, I wrote furiously, datapad shaking beneath my fingertips. "They do not fear failure," I wrote. "They seek it. They chase limits until those limits bend." In my culture, the goal of civilization was stability, predictability. Remove the unknown, remove the risk. Here, I had found the opposite. Here, evolution continued not biologically, but willfully. They engineered change, invited discomfort, not to suffer, but to adapt, and not just as individuals. As a species, they didn't merely cope with disaster. They improved because of it. Their progress was fueled not by peace, but by pressure. In the archives of their history, I found evidence that stunned me: waves of extinction followed by innovation. Each calamity became a catalyst. The Great Wars gave rise to global cooperation. Pandemics drove medical revolutions. Collapse forged resilience. Their greatest minds, when faced with failure, didn't retreat, they iterated. Their thinkers welcomed contradiction. Their poets praised suffering. Their inventors embraced error. I watched archival footage of one of their machines designed to carry them beyond Earth explode in flame, 17 lives lost, and they rebuilt it. They called it the Challenger, and still, they reached again for the stars. They didn't see tragedy as a reason to stop, they saw it as a reason to continue, because to them, the act of striving was sacred. Their flaws were not hidden. They were worn like armor. It wasn't perfection they pursued, it was growth, relentless, unyielding growth. And suddenly, my own world, our philosophies, our structures felt brittle. We had plateaued in comfort, designed stagnation into elegance. Our children learned avoidance. Our society shunned conflict. But here, on this loud, chaotic, unpredictable world, I had witnessed something ancient and primal, the soul of a species that refuses to stand still. And I wondered, as I stared at the skyline, had we evolved past struggle? Or had we simply lost our fire? The chamber was vast, filled with humans of every kind. Leaders, thinkers, observers. They called it the United Nations, a place where they attempted to speak as one, though they rarely agreed. I stood before them, no longer trembling. The building's height no longer unnerved me. The voices, the chatter, the hum of 1,000 restless minds no longer overwhelmed me. I understood them now. I stepped forward, breath steady, and spoke not from protocol, but from truth. When I first arrived, I was terrified, not of you, but of what I did not understand. The room quieted. I was sent here to evaluate your readiness to join the galactic community. But after what I've seen, I must pose a different question entirely. I paused, scanning the room. Their eyes met mine, curious, suspicious, hopeful. The question is no longer whether you are ready for the galaxy. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for you. I could feel their pulse through the walls. Not fear, not pride, readiness. I continued. You build homes in the sky, not because it is safe but because it is hard. You leap from heights, plunge into oceans, climb into the void not in ignorance, but in defiance. You face pain as if it were a teacher. You embrace danger as if it were a right. I raised a hand, activating a display of images. Human cities reaching skyward, spaceships lifting off, children laughing on ropes high above canyons, surgeons working with grace, athletes defying physics. You don't just adapt to your world, I said. You reconfigure it. When others flee from storms, you chase them. When others retreat from death, you study it. When others fear fire, you capture it and build civilizations around it. You make games out of your fears. You turn your nightmares into art. You watch simulations of war, of terror, of tragedy, and not only do you endure, you cheer. You are the only species I have ever encountered that willingly dreams of its own extinction, then uses that vision to innovate. I let the silence hold. Then, the core of it. You are not fragile. You are not reckless. You are resilient. Other species bend when strained. You break and then rebuild yourselves stronger than before. You do not respect limits. You challenge them until they crack. And that, I said, voice steady now, is why the galaxy should be cautious, not afraid, but aware, because the galaxy has known many survivors, but it has never known one like you. After the speech, I returned to my quarters. There was no applause ringing in my ears, no sense of triumph, only gravity. I opened my log, not for the council, but for myself. My fingers hovered, then began. They are not merely another species. They are not anomalies. They are something entirely new. Humans are not survivors by accident. They are survivors by philosophy. Every system of safety that our civilizations built, humans tore apart to see what lay beneath, not out of disrespect, but curiosity, not destruction but drive. Their instinct was not to shield themselves from danger. It was to ask, what happens if I go through it? They burn and rise again. They fail and learn again. They fall and climb again. Their entertainment is violent, not because they glorify suffering but because they rehearse their response to chaos. Their medicine is invasive not because they lack compassion, but because they will not tolerate decay, their children are taught to struggle, to stumble, to stand. And so, I prepared my final recommendation for the council, not with fear, but with clarity. 1. Engage with humanity. Share knowledge. Trade ideas. They will elevate our understanding of persistence. 2. Never attempt conquest, coercion, or intimidation. It will fail, because they do not submit, because when threatened, they do not retreat, they adapt, they absorb, and then they rise stronger than before. I included my own vulnerability too. I arrived with certainty. I now leave with humility. This species has changed me. And then, the final line, the one I hoped would be remembered. The galaxy does not need to protect humans from danger. It needs to protect itself from underestimating them. That evening, as my vessel prepared for departure, I looked out one last time over Earth. The towers gleamed like blades of light against the horizon, and I understood each of them was not just a structure. It was a challenge answered, a question met with action, a dare whispered to the sky, and then fulfilled. And in that moment, I feared something I hadn't feared before, not for me, but for the rest of the galaxy, because soon, humans would come, knocking. And when they did, nothing would remain the same. The last sunrise I witnessed from Earth was not gentle. It blazed. The light struck the horizon like defiance. Golden fire reflecting off towers of steel and glass. The planet did not whisper farewell. It roared it. As I stood aboard my vessel, final systems humming with readiness, I gazed one last time at the world below. This place once alien, now unforgettable. And in my chest, something stirred that I had never brought home from any other world. Not fear, not pity, but reverence. I recorded my final log to the Earth Council and to all those who would dare to chart the stars. Be warned, humanity is not like us. They do not fear the abyss. They descend into it to map it, to name it, and to build ladders for others to climb. They do not flinch from fire. They forge with it. They do not ask, is it safe? They ask, is it worth it? They are not careless. They are deliberate. They are driven. I thought back to everything I'd seen: the child who rose after falling, the surgeon who opened flesh with calm precision, the thrill seekers who danced with death and called it joy. These weren't accidents. This was design. This was their nature. I added one final line, not as an ambassador, but as one soul to another. If humanity ever turns its gaze outward with the same fury it uses to overcome itself, the universe will have no choice but to make room. And as the thrusters engaged, lifting me slowly into the void, I did not feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was leaving behind something greater than I could explain, a beginning. Below me, the cities shrank, but their spirit did not, for it was never in the structures. It was in the will. The last words I spoke before entering hyperspace were not protocol, they were prophecy. Good luck, galaxy. You're going to need it.